Hi there, I'm Vincent Bos and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing This is Why They Ghosted You. I provide audio coaching for breakup recovery, trying to get an ex back, attracting someone new, and life coaching. Visit www.dateme.tips for more details. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. Check out my socials for extra content. The links are in the description. So now let's get back into today's podcast. And today we are discussing This is Why They Ghosted You. So if you have been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, you will be extra anxious if you've been ghosted. But why did they do it? In today's podcast, I'll be discussing 3 reasons why your ex ghosted you. So let's get straight into this, and point number 1 is you were abusive. Now hopefully most of you listening will not connect to this first point in today's podcast, but it doesn't mean, but it's not important to say, because we want to give a balanced viewpoint about why someone might ghost their former partner. And although there are a whole manner of reasons and possibilities, one of the ones which sometimes people don't want to look at face on, but still is very, very important to discuss, is that the dumpee was abusive. Now, I'm not saying you were, and like I said, hopefully most of you weren't. Perhaps some of you didn't think you were, and now you look back and think, actually, I crossed the line a few times here, and I should never have done that, and I'm certainly never going to be doing anything like that again. Whatever your perspective, it's important just to consider these possibilities, because when we think about why someone will just vanish from our life, sometimes we have to look in that metaphorical mirror, really self-reflect and think, why would they? Now, why would somebody who was in love with me, who was in a relationship with me, why would they suddenly not just end the relationship, but vanish? Okay? Now, maybe your relationship wasn't that long. Maybe you hadn't even said you loved one another. Maybe you were just casually dating. And again, they've just vanished. Why is that? Well, let's take a look at ourselves first. Is it something that you said? Is it something that you did? Is it the way you behaved? Is it the way you made them feel? Now, depending on the length of your relationship, the depth of your relationship, the circumstances of your relationship, this could look in a whole subsection of possibilities, from severe, terrible, awful abuse, which, if that is you, if you are the person who has done that, well, you obviously don't deserve your ex to come back to you anyway, and you need to get professional help. But there might be a number of you who don't fit into that most extreme category, but now you look back, you think, actually, I didn't really treat my ex that well. So maybe it wasn't abusive per se, but you now self-reflect and think, actually, I didn't really treat them that well. And although I would have preferred and liked and hoped for a conversation at the time of a breakup, I can kind of see of why they've now ran away. I can kind of now see and understand why they blocked me, why they've vanished, why they've deleted everything, why I can't have any type of conversation or chat at all. I now get it. And if you fall into that category of person, it doesn't mean you're an awful, dreadful person if you took a few missteps, but they are life lessons that we need to learn. We need to treat people with respect. We need to treat people how we would like to be treated. We need to make sure that we are not being abusive in any single way, even if you feel it wasn't actually abuse, if you were being negative, if you made somebody feel bad in your presence, or whether you were just texting and communicating at the time and they've now gone, think about how your actions have affected their mindset. They have decided that they don't want to communicate with you. They don't want to be with you. They don't want to even give you an explanation. So when we consider about why someone's ghosted you, we do have to first of all self-reflect. It's not the nicest thing to talk about. It's not something that hopefully most of you will even fall into a category of, but it is very important that we do recognize and understand that it is a possibility. It's not all about the dumper being a quote-unquote bad person. It's not about the dumper doing things which are unfair. Sometimes it's about the dumper making a sensible choice for their own health and well-being. Sometimes it's the dumper making a decision that everybody who knows and loves them, their friends and family, have maybe been begging and pleading them to do for a good while because they can see that your relationship was sadly toxic. Now, I don't know the specifics of your situation, but you will know deep down in your heart. And if you do fall into this broad category of if you were abusive, then if you were really abusive, as we've said, then you shouldn't be expecting your ex to come back, and you do need professional help. If you're not quite on that side of the spectrum, but you have still treated your now ex badly, again, can you really expect them to come back? And if they do, you need to make sure you are a better person, not just in the ways I often describe, such as self-improvement for your health and fitness, etc. But no, you need to make sure you're a better person in the way that you treat others. Because if you are lucky enough to have your ex consider coming back to you and you fall into this category in some way, well, you need to make sure you treat them better next time around. And if you don't get them back, you need to make sure you treat the next person in your life much better than you did your dumper. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast. Please like this video if you're watching on YouTube. And if you have the new hype feature, please hype this video as well. If you like my content, subscribe to the channel to keep updated. And point number 2 is they don't know what to say. Now this might sound a bit of a cop-out. This might sound like, oh, that is an excuse that we're just allowing dumpers to have. What do we mean they don't know what to say? Well, it is a reality. Some dumpers do not know what to say and therefore will say nothing at all and theoretically run away. Now, somebody ends a relationship because they've lost romantic emotional attraction. There is no other reason as to why somebody would come to that conclusion. Now, the reason they lose romantic emotional attraction, now that obviously could have multiple possibilities. But the fact is, they've lost attraction, it's dropped to a necessary low point, they've actioned the breakup. That is why they've ended the relationship. So we have to understand their position here. They've lost attraction. Now, if they have lost attraction, it doesn't necessarily mean that they dislike you, certainly doesn't mean that they hate you, certainly doesn't mean that we're thinking of point number 1 that we've just discussed. This could just be an unfortunate situation where one person, your now ex-dumper, became your ex-dumper because they lost attraction for one reason or another. But they don't want to hurt you, they don't want to upset you, and they don't really know what to say. On top of that, they're actually concerned that if they do speak with you, you might have the ability to talk them round, you will then agree to get back together, and you know deep down in your heart, that isn't what you want. You don't feel it's going to work, but you believe that your dumpee has the communication skill set to persuade you to come back. And you're thinking, well, it's not going to work anyway. So what is the point in speaking? Not only that, some dumpers in this position do not want to see their dumpee upset. It would break their heart. And you might think, well, they broke my heart. But a dumper does not necessarily or even likely want to see their dumpee in pain. And this is just not a common thing that dumpers feel and think. Despite what you might believe dumpees, in your hour of pain, it doesn't mean that your ex-dumper actually wants to hurt you. Very few dumpers actually do. So they would feel awful if they saw you in pain. They would feel awful if they communicated with you and they could see the tears rolling down your eyes, or they could hear you crying on the phone, or they could feel the pain in your text. They don't want that. So what do? Well, you might suggest and argue it's the easy option, but they run away. They run away one way or another via ghosting you. Maybe you did have somewhat of communication to explain that the relationship was now over and now they've gone, or perhaps you didn't even get that and they've literally just vanished from your life and they've blocked you. Maybe your relationship wasn't that long, wasn't too deep, but it's still affecting you because you've been on 5 or 6 dates and they've now just vanished. You know, it's not nice. It's not nice to be on the receiving end of that, but sometimes the reason for this is because the dumper just doesn't know what to say. They've got no idea what to do or say, and therefore they are in this position. And if you're wondering how I know so much about this perspective, it's because I'm somewhat ashamed to admit that I have been that person many, many years ago in my life. A couple of decades ago, when I was a much younger man, I was dating a woman not for many dates, but I wasn't feeling the vibe. I didn't really feel it was going anywhere. I didn't feel this was my person. But I was so concerned about what they might say, think, or feel if we had that breakup conversation. But instead of being respectful enough to communicate, I just let things drift away. Now, did I do a proper full-on ghosting? Not exactly, but it probably does fit into that bracket. I was in a situation where we was meeting on dates. I would text them, they would text me. But what I would do towards the end of this, when I was starting to feel it wasn't for me, is instead of telling them my thoughts and feelings and being respectful in that way, instead, I just stopped texting them. Now, I did respond if I got a text from them, so I didn't send the initial message anymore. But if I did receive a text myself, I would reply, but I would take longer and longer and longer to send my response. And not only that, I would make excuses as for why I was unable to meet them, okay? I would make excuses, I would take longer to reply, and eventually things just faded away and fizzled out. So it might not have been a complete and utter ghosting, but I do think it is within the same theoretical concept of how I ended things. I ended things in a way which I don't believe was the right way. Now I look back with a sense of guilt. I don't believe I should have treated that person that way. I should have had a conversation. I should have been straightforward. But that was me a couple of decades ago. You live and learn, you mature, you grow, you improve, and that is not something that I would ever consider doing now or in the future. It's not the way I think people should be behaving, but I have to acknowledge that is my past. But I can tell you this story because I know how I felt. And in my mind, I lost attraction, but I felt really guilty about it and awful and didn't really think it was going anywhere and just wanted it to fade away, but didn't believe I had the words or the way about me to convey it. So I just thought I would, in a sense, back off and eventually run away. Now, if you would like advice and support about how to try and increase the chance of one day getting your ex back, then you may want to consider my audio coaching service, where me and you can speak one-on-one about your unique specific situation. Go to my website www.dateme.tips for more information about how I can become your coach and your teammate via my audio coaching service. Talking about your feelings can also improve your mental health. It helps prevent the buildup of negative emotions, which can lead to stress, anxiety, depression, and even physical health issues. Speak your heart to free your mind. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast. If you feel that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description. And point number 3 is they want to make things clear. Now, this is a situation that a lot of dumpers have told me as the reason that they have ghosted a former partner. And this is that they want to make things clear. But what exactly does that mean? Well, in essence, it means they do not want to lead on their now former partner. They don't want to lead on the dumpee. Therefore, they want to make it absolutely clear that the relationship is over. Now, is this the best way to do it? No, I don't think it is. But it is what we could suggest a very clear way. As a dumpee, you feel that pain, but you also can understand your dumper's position. Now, you might say, well, I don't really understand. That's the problem. I have no closure. And that is a very, very valid point. But you can't misunderstand the perspective that they no longer want to be in the connection. So, yes, you don't have the closure, which can be a terrible feeling, but you are clear that they no longer want to be in that relationship or connection. And this is where some dumpers decide to ghost. It doesn't mean it's right. I don't think it's right. If I speak with people, I don't suggest we do it. But I've been told numerous times by dumpers they've ghosted someone because they don't want to lead them on. They want to make things clear. It's over. I don't want to be with you. This is not going anywhere. We're not getting back together. Done. Now, maybe you are a dumpee who has been ghosted without blocking. Maybe you are a dumpee who has been ghosted with blocking. I've spoke to dumpees from different perspectives, and they all have an angle about what they feel would be the best way to go about this. And ghosting as a whole is not the way that anybody wants to see. But whether or not you were blocked, and that could be deemed as ultra clear, whether you weren't blocked, and that makes you think, maybe the door is still open, I don't know where they've gone though. I can't say how you feel is the best way around this, but what I would suggest is that you wish there had been communication. And that is the overriding point here. I believe communication is key, and relationships break down due to poor communication. These are the ends of a relationship, of course, but who knows what could have happened with communication through the relationship. I'm not saying that a dumper should be persuaded to stay in a connection they don't want to, but if communication was better throughout the relationship, it maybe wouldn't have got to this point. So if you're a dumpee and you have been ghosted, my advice would be focus on you, improve every day, live your life to the full. You might still hear from your ex again. I've heard of dumpers who ghosted their former partner and then 6, 9, 12 months down the line, reach out to them. So it's not impossible. I wouldn't say wait around and assume it will happen, but it could happen. Ghosting doesn't mean they can't come back, depending on the reason that they've ghosted. But as a dumpee, you need to try and remove the speculation from your mind and focus on you, living your life the best way you can. And whatever the reason your dumper did ghost you, well, maybe they'll come back, maybe they won't. But if they do, you need to be the best version of yourself. And if they don't, that best version of yourself will attract someone even better.